Hey, I think we're live. Hey, athletes, it's Kathleen Oswalt here, registered dietitian and culinary nutrition expert. I am here today to show you a new way to cook tofu so you feel like you're mastering the art of tofu. I'm Kathleen Oswalt. If you don't know who I am, I'm a registered dietitian and certified culinary nutrition expert. My husband and I, Don, we have Eat Love Triathlon together, and we also have a Facebook community called the Plant Powered Athlete. If you're an endurance athlete and you're not in the group, come on over and ask to join. We'd love to have you in there. That's the Plant Powered Athlete. All right, so today I'm here to show you how to master tofu. So I think it was a couple weeks ago, maybe even 3 weeks ago now. I'm not sure, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I had a lot of fun. I went to a cooking class over in Mount Pleasant, another town right by us. And I went to learn how to master tofu. And I feel like I do a decent job with tofu, but I always feel like there's more to learn, and then I can share it with you guys. So I did learn a whole new technique on how to cook tofu, and so I want to share that with you today. And again, like I had mentioned earlier, if you have an aversion to tofu, like the texture, you don't really like it that much, this way of cooking really does change up the texture, and so I think you might like it so much better. It does take a little bit of maybe some extra time. I don't know, maybe not, because you still have to press tofu and all that. We're not pressing tofu really today, a little bit, but not like you typically would, for 20 or 30 minutes. Instead, we're going to be cooking the tofu. So I'm really excited to share that with you. Now, if something, tofu comes from soy, and if that's something that you're not quite sure about, I think it was a 3-part series on soy and why it is so beneficial for you, and a couple of different things in why soy is so beneficial for the plant-powered athlete is that it's high in plant protein and it's high in calcium. And it's got some other great qualities as well, but soy in general, specifically tofu, is a really great food to get into your diet. And so if you do still have questions about soy, you can find the 3-part series on the Eat Love Triathlon page, or you can find it in our group, the Plant Powered Athlete. Okay, so why don't we get started? The first thing that you're going to do with your tofu when you buy it at the store, you're going to bring it home, and instead of putting it in the refrigerator, you're going to put it in the freezer. And putting your tofu in the freezer right off the bat is going to change the texture of the tofu. So that's what you're going to do. And I've got one here that I just took out of the freezer a few minutes ago, and you can see, well, it's pretty hard as a rock. I thought it was going to make more noise than that, but it's pretty solid. So what we're going to do is take our tofu from the freezer. We're going to get a pot of water boiling, and we're going to put that frozen tofu in the package with just a little slit. Let's see. I got to find a place that's not frozen. With just a little slit in the packet right into the boiling water. I know it sounds crazy, but that's what we're going to do, and I promise it works. So before we got started, I put a frozen package of tofu in the boiling water, and I boiled it so far it's been going for 18 minutes. So the total time is 20. I'm just going to go ahead and take it out and cut it short because I think 18 minutes is probably going to be fine. So you want to boil it anywhere between like 15 and 20 minutes, probably more on the 20-minute side. And then what you're going to do is you're going to put your tofu package straight into an ice bath. So let me get that started. I've got some ice in this bowl already. I'm just going to fill it with water. And we're going to stick the boiling package of tofu right on in the ice bath. Let that cool down so we can handle it. That's the big thing. We need to be able to handle it. Okay. So I've got my ice bath. I've got my package of tofu, and I'm just going to put it right on in there. Let that cool down. And what I'm going to do is take this package of tofu here, the frozen one that I showed you. Oops, stripping a little bit. I'm going to place it right on in the water, and I'm going to put it back on the stove and boil it for 20 minutes. And remember, it's got a small slice in the package, so it can breathe a little bit. So we're going to just let that cool down. The tofu started to kind of thaw just a little bit when I took it out of the freezer, so that's why liquid was dripping out, but typically it wouldn't do that. Okay. Of course, I got it all over my glasses. All right, so you don't have to leave it in the ice bath any particular time. You just want it to cool off enough. So again, you can handle it because we are going to press it a little bit now. Okay. And while we leave that in the ice bath just a couple of minutes longer, you can either press it with a cheesecloth. I've got cheesecloth here, and I'll probably use this. If you don't have cheesecloth, no biggie. You can just use some paper towels. And I want to show you the interesting part. The texture of the tofu is just going to be so much different than if you had the tofu in the refrigerator, cut it open, drained out the water, and pressed it from there. Usually it's very spongy still and holds a lot of water. Usually still holds a lot of water, and so this way it's much more, it's still kind of spongy, but just much more dense and doesn't hold the water as much. So also the other thing that I wanted to mention is that you want to, the first tofu that I cooked was a firm tofu because that's what I had at home at the time. But if you can, try to do the extra firm, and that's what I've got in the pan in the back. Either one will work, but the extra firm just holds, it's just more dense. So let's see, let's go ahead and take this out of the water. Whoops. Just gonna kind of squeeze the water out of the slit that I have there. Okay. I'm gonna cut this open. And you can see, let's see, you can see that this is just very, it's almost has the imprint of my hand on it when I squeeze it. It's just very spongy, but in a different way. It's hard to explain. So basically what I did was I just put it in the cheesecloth, and I'm just gonna press down. A lot of the time when you press down on tofu that you haven't froze and cooked in the pan, it will kind of crumble if you press too hard. You have to be careful. But with this, you can pretty much put a lot of pressure on it, and it's not falling apart. So that's really nice. So I might use a couple of paper towels here. And then I'm going to cook it up a little bit for you. It actually still feels like it might be, I don't know about frozen, but it's still, in the middle it's cool. We'll see. So it might take a little bit more than 20 minutes at a boil. Now what we're going to do is slice this. So we're going to slice it in half lengthways. And then we're going to slice it into small little slabs. And then another thing that is really different is that I learned from the chef that was cooking the tofu is that he coats it in nutritional yeast, and that kind of gives it its crunchiness on the outside. So I've got some nutritional yeast here on the pan, or on the plate. And once we've got it cut up, we're going to cover it or coat it in nutritional yeast, and then we're going to cook it up in the pan. So let me see if this thing's frozen still or if it's going to cut for us. It is still frozen. Yeah. Okay. So you might need to do more than 20 minutes. I obviously haven't tried this technique since I went to the cooking class, but I'm just going to cut it in slabs. So I've got it in slabs, little pieces. You can make them as big or as small as you want. You can cut this in thirds lengthwise if you want. And I'm just coating it in the nutritional yeast here. So we've got a nice coating all the way around. Okay. So let's get our pan warm. For this, I'm going to use a nonstick pan. I don't use a nonstick pan very often at all, but there are a few things that I will use it for, and this nutritional yeast I will use it for so it doesn't stick and we can get, you know, a nice brown on it. The other thing you could do is try cooking it in the oven, maybe at 350 degrees on a cookie sheet, maybe on some parchment paper, and see if that works for you. I am going to put just a little bit of oil in this once I get it heated up. Not very much though, because it is non-stick. And we're going to brown it up. And then this tofu you could use like in a vegetable stir fry. You could, put that on top of noodles or rice. You could use it in a Buddha bowl. You could use these, pieces of tofu however you would like. You just want to make sure that you're getting all the sides, getting it nice and coated. This is going to give it a nice, just earthy flavor as well. And it will pair very nicely with whatever sauce that you want to use with it. So I did make a little homemade teriyaki sauce really quickly. Took me about 5 minutes or less. And I'm going to use that to flavor the tofu and the vegetables that I cook with it. And then it can also be used as a little bit of a extra on the side if you want to put some on your rice and top your vegetables off with it. We want to get the pan hot, and then what we want to do is turn it down a little bit so our nutritional yeast doesn't burn, but it just gets nice and brown. So I'm just going to place these in the pan. And it just takes a little bit of patience. So this way might be a little bit longer to cook up, but I think you're going to enjoy it. Especially if, again, you are somebody that has a little bit of aversion to the texture of tofu. So I'm going to turn this down a little bit to like a medium heat. You can see the tofu boiling in the pan right now. And again, we're going to give that more than 20 minutes because the tofu that I cooked still was solid inside, so we don't want that. This is good practice. Oh my goodness. So we're just going to let that cook a couple minutes on each side. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the teriyaki, and again, first we're going to cook up the tofu. What we might do after that is take the tofu out of the pan. I'm not going to cook up all the vegetables and everything right now, but what you would do is take the tofu out of the pan, put your vegetables in, a medley of vegetables, whether that's broccoli, carrots, snow peas, celery, bell peppers, whatever you want to put in your medley of vegetables in the pan. Saute those up really nicely, maybe with some garlic. And then you can start slowly adding in some of the teriyaki sauce and cook it in the teriyaki sauce so the flavors meld together very nicely. And then you can put your tofu in and do the same thing, add in the teriyaki and allow the flavors to really meld together. Now the tofu, the way the texture is that it shouldn't fall apart easily. It should hold its texture and its form, even cooking it in the pan and tossing it around with the vegetables and the teriyaki sauce, where if you don't freeze it and then cook it in the pan, you know that tofu kind of crumbles and falls apart if you're not very careful with it, even the extra firm. So that's one thing that's very nice about making, putting it in the freezer, cooking it in the boiling water, and then coating it in the nutritional yeast and cooking it in the pan or the oven. So I'm just flipping the tofu, kind of checking how it's doing. It is starting to get a little brown. You can see that. And it's starting to brown up a little bit. So we'll just keep warming it through and browning it up. Okay. And then I also did talk recently about nutritional yeast and how healthy that can be for you on a plant-based diet. If you're heavily plant-based, where you're really not eating much animal products at all anymore, maybe it's just kind of very sporadic here and there, or if you're vegan. So fortified nutritional yeast is a great way to get in B12, and that's something that we're missing from our food because a lot of it is found in animal products. And we don't find that a lot in our plant foods. And so either using fortified foods or using a supplement is going to be very beneficial for vegan/heavily plant-based athletes. And so this is a great way to get some nutritional yeast into your meal as well. So that's a great way to get some vitamin B12. I'll roll the unfrozen pieces in the nutritional yeast, and I'll cook those up too once I'm done showing you guys what I'm going to do. The other thing you can kind of speed up the process so you're not in here cooking a long time is cooking your vegetables in another pan and getting those, sauteed down and mixed in with the teriyaki sauce. Again, you can use any sauce that you want. It doesn't have to be teriyaki sauce. This is just how he cooked it in the cooking class, and it was really, really good. And although the teriyaki sauce I made is good, his was like phenomenal. It really had a lot of depth of flavor, a lot of ginger in it, which this teriyaki sauce does have some ginger, but I think next time I would add more of that just to give it a little bit more ginger flavor. You could also do an extra batch, so you've got, some meals for the week. Starting to get nice and crispy. I'm going to add in some of the teriyaki sauce and kind of start getting those flavors together. I'm just going to drizzle it on the tofu and then flip them, kind of roll the tofu. I need some tongs. That's not going to work. Flip the tofu and start, maybe turn this down. Start cooking the tofu in that flavor. And you can keep doing this just slowly if you want to. And again, by now you'd have your vegetables and your tofu mixed in together, and you'd just be kind of sauteing it all together. The teriyaki has sugar, a little bit of brown sugar in it and some honey, so it's kind of sticky. But you can see that your tofu is nice and brown. It's got a little bit of a coating on it. It's, let me take this off of here. It's got a different texture. You can kind of see that it's nice and spongy, it's thick, it's not breaking apart really easily. So it's just, again, a different way to to cook tofu. So the main points are to put your tofu in the freezer when you get home. When you're ready to cook it, submerge it into boiling hot water and cook it at least 20 minutes, but we're thinking maybe like 25-30, right? Because I did it for 20 minutes boiling and it's still solid in the middle. So think about boiling it for about 20 to 30 minutes. Before you put it into the water, you want to make a little slit in the top. And once you've boiled it, you're going to put it into an ice bath, right? So you can handle it, allow it to cool off. Once the tofu is cooled off, slice it open and get your tofu out, and then press it with either paper towels or cheesecloth, get that extra water out of it. And mine pressed okay, but if it's completely cooked through and not frozen, it will press easier, and it just won't, it's a different press than if you took it from the refrigerator. There's just not as much water, and again, your tofu just has a completely different texture. You can press it hard, and it's just kind of like a sponge that doesn't fall apart. It's more, like I said, I could see the imprint of my hand on the tofu. Then once you have your tofu pressed, you'll just cut it in half or thirds lengthwise, and then cut it into slabs. Coat it in your nutritional yeast, and then cook it on medium-high in preferably a non-stick pan with just a little bit of oil, or in an oven at 350 degrees. And just kind of keep an eye on it. I'm not sure how long it would take in the oven. And the chef wasn't quite sure either, just because most of the time he does cook it in a non-stick pan. So maybe about like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, just keep an eye on it. And then you can flavor it up if you desire with maybe some teriyaki sauce or a peanut sauce or something like that. Coat your vegetables in the pan with it, and maybe use a little bit of the dressing on your rice or your noodles, and you've got a really nice meal. And again, the tofu just has a completely different texture, and I think you'll really enjoy it. All right, you guys, if you want to know more about soy or more about nutritional yeast, you can find my posts on Eat Love Triathlon or in our Facebook community, The Plant Powered Athlete. Just come on over and ask to join, and we'd love to have endurance athletes in there with the other ones that we have in there. And that's it. All right, you guys, enjoy your Saturday, and I hope you find this helpful. If so, let me know in the comments below, and if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. All right, take care.